Honestly, Emma, if you can't even manage to keep a job at your age, maybe you should stop showing up to family dinners. It's embarrassing. My mother's voice cut through the dining room like a blade wrapped in silk, clean, precise, meant to wound without ever raising her tone. I sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, and felt the familiar weight of humiliation settle over my shoulders, like an old coat I'd worn too many times. The mashed potatoes on my plate blurred slightly. I didn't blink. I didn't move. I just existed in that moment, suspended between the urge to defend myself and the exhausting knowledge that it wouldn't matter. Carol Watson, my mother, didn't wait for a response. She never did. She simply turned back to Chloe, my younger sister, and smiled that warm, approving smile she reserved only for her. Chloe, tell us more about the venue you picked. Mark must be so proud. Mark, Chloe's fiancé, nodded with that easy confidence of someone who'd never been told he wasn't enough. Chloe beamed, her hand resting on his arm, her engagement ring catching the light like a tiny spotlight. I am Emma Watson. I'm 32 years old. I live in a modest one-bedroom apartment in Seattle, and I work as a freelance graphic designer. Some months are good. Some months I eat ramen and wonder if I should have chosen a different path. But I chose this life because I loved it, because I thought passion mattered more than paychecks. My mother has never agreed. I set my fork down slowly, carefully, the way you'd handle something fragile. My hands didn't shake. They hadn't in years. You learn to control the small things when the big things are always out of reach. I have work, Mom, I said quietly. Freelance doesn't mean unemployed. She didn't even look at me. Freelance is just a nice word for unstable, sweetheart. At some point, you have to grow up. Chloe glanced at me, and for a second, I thought I saw something like pity in her eyes. But she said nothing. She never did. Mark shifted in his seat, uncomfortable but silent. No one ever defended me at these dinners. No one ever questioned Carol. It's funny how a single sentence can sum up a lifetime of feeling invisible. I know many of you have felt the sting of being the other in your own family. If you've ever had to walk away from a moment like this and just breathe, then you know exactly how I felt. Stick around, because this is the story of what happens when the invisible person finally decides to be seen. Like and subscribe if you're ready to see what comes next. I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped against the hardwood floor, loud in the sudden silence. I should go, I said. Emma, don't be dramatic, my mother said, still not looking at me. Finish your dinner. I'm not hungry. I walked out of the dining room, my steps measured, controlled. I didn't slam doors. I didn't cry. I moved through the hallway like a ghost passing through walls, weightless and unnoticed. But as I reached for my coat, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror, and beyond it, framed in the doorway behind me, I saw my mother. She was watching me. Her expression wasn't angry or concerned. It was satisfied, cold, like she'd accomplished exactly what she'd set out to do. I stopped. I looked at her reflection, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look away. I held her gaze. I let her see that I saw her, that I understood. And something shifted. Something small and quiet, but real. A flicker of resolve, sharp and cold, settled into my chest where the hurt usually lived. I didn't smile. I didn't speak. I just held her eyes for 3 long seconds. Then I turned, opened the door, and walked out into the cool Seattle evening. The air smelled like rain and exhaust. I stood on the porch for a moment, breathing it in, feeling the weight of 32 years of being dismissed, overlooked, and diminished pressing down on me. But this time, I didn't crumble under it. This time, I felt something else rising, something sharp, something that tasted like clarity. I pulled my phone from my pocket and stared at the screen. No messages, no missed calls, just the time glowing back at me in the darkness. I thought about going home, about crawling into bed and letting this night fade into the long list of nights just like it, about waking up tomorrow and pretending it didn't hurt. But I didn't move. I just stood there, phone in hand, staring at the empty screen. And I realized something. I was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. The kind that comes from carrying other people's opinions of you for so long that you forget what you actually are. I wasn't embarrassing. I wasn't unstable. I wasn't a failure. I was just Emma, and maybe that was enough. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and started walking toward my car. My steps were steady. My breathing was calm. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the hurt and the anger and the exhaustion, something new was beginning to take shape. Something that felt a lot like a decision. I drove home in silence, the kind of silence that feels thick, like it has weight. My hands gripped the steering wheel, steady and calm, but my mind was somewhere else. Somewhere in the past, replaying every moment that led to tonight. My mother has always been careful. That's the thing people don't understand about neglect. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it just looks away. When I was 17, I got accepted into a good art school. Not Ivy League, but good. I was proud. I showed my mother the acceptance letter at breakfast, my hands shaking with excitement. She glanced at it. "That's nice, Emma. Did you see Chloe made honor roll again?" That was it. No congratulations, no celebration. Just a pivot back to Chloe, who was 14 and perfect in every way that I apparently wasn't. I went to that art school anyway. I paid for most of it myself through loans and part-time jobs. My mother paid for Chloe's college in full 4 years later. Business school, practical, stable, everything I wasn't. I remember the car accident too. I was 19. Someone rear-ended me at a stoplight. Minor damage. I was shaken, but fine. I called my mother from the side of the road, my voice trembling. "Are you hurt?" she asked. "No, but the car—" "Then handle it, Emma. I'm at Chloe's recital." She hung up. I sat there in my dented car, watching traffic pass, and I realized something. I was always going to be the interruption, the inconvenience, the one who could handle things alone because no one was coming to help. Our birthdays are 2 days apart, March 10th and March 12th. When we were kids, my mother threw joint parties to save money and effort. Except they were never really joint. Chloe's cake was always bigger. Her gifts were always wrapped in better paper. Her friends were always invited first. I stopped expecting anything by the time I turned 16. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was mature enough to not need validation. But you can't lie to yourself forever. The financial divide only grew wider as we got older. I chose freelance work because I love design. I loved creating something from nothing. But love doesn't pay rent. Some months I barely scraped by. Some months I had to choose between groceries and electricity. Chloe went into marketing, corporate, salary, benefits. My mother called it stability. She called my life a phase. "When are you going to get serious, Emma?" she'd ask every few months, her tone light but cutting. I stopped answering. I stopped visiting as much. I thought distance would hurt less. I thought if I didn't show up, I wouldn't have to feel invisible. But my mother didn't see my absence as self-preservation. She saw it as proof. Proof that I was weak. Proof that I couldn't handle family. Proof that I was exactly what she always said I was. I pulled into my apartment complex and turned off the engine. The dashboard lights faded. I sat there in the dark, my phone glowing in the cup holder. One new message. I picked it up. My mother's name filled the screen. "Emma, I need you to design Chloe and Mark's wedding invitations. Nothing too fancy. Just something nice. Family favor. Let me know by tomorrow." I read it twice, then a third time. No mention of dinner, no acknowledgement of what she'd said. Just a request. Casual. Expected. Free labor wrapped in the language of obligation. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Then I set the phone down gently on the passenger seat. A family favor. I leaned back against the headrest and closed my eyes. My chest felt tight, but my breathing stayed even. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, absorbing the audacity of it. She didn't even wait a full hour. I opened my eyes and looked out at the dark parking lot. A streetlight flickered nearby. A cat crossed between two cars. And I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to be enough, trying to prove I mattered. trying to earn a love that was never going to be given freely. I thought about how tired I was, and I thought about what I was going to do next. I unlocked my apartment door and stepped inside. The silence hit me first. Not the peaceful kind, the heavy kind that presses against your chest and makes you aware of how alone you are. I set my keys on the counter, flipped on the light. My apartment is small, but it's mine. Every piece of furniture, every framed print on the wall, every plant on the windowsill. I chose it all. I paid for it all. This space was supposed to be safe, but tonight it felt like a cage. I walked to my desk and opened my laptop. A client project stared back at me. A logo redesign for a local coffee shop. Simple work. Good work. The kind that pays bills and keeps me fed. I tried to focus. I moved the mouse, clicked a few tools, adjusted a color palette. Nothing. My mother's voice kept replaying in my head. If you can't even manage to keep a job at your age, maybe you should stop showing up to family dinners. I closed the laptop. My hands were steady, but my chest felt tight. I stood up and walked to the window. The city lights blinked back at me, distant and cold. Somewhere out there, people were having normal family dinners. Somewhere out there, mothers were proud of their daughters. I wasn't angry. Not in the loud breaking things way. I was angry in the quiet way that settles into your bones and stays there. The kind of anger that comes from years of being told you're not enough, in 100 small ways until you almost start to believe it. Almost. I thought about calling someone, a friend, anyone. But the truth is, I don't have many. I kept people at arm's length for so long that eventually they stopped reaching. It was easier that way. Easier than explaining why my mother looked at me like I was a disappointment. Easier than admitting I came from a family that didn't want me. I sat down on the couch and pulled my phone from my pocket. My mother's text was still there, glowing and expectant. Emma, I need you to design Chloe and Mark's wedding invitations. Nothing too fancy. Just something nice. Family favor. Let me know by tomorrow. A family favor. I read those words again. Family. As if we were something real. As if there was mutual respect and love and support. As if I owed her anything after tonight. I scrolled up through our old messages. Months of one-sided conversations. Me asking if she wanted to meet for coffee. Her replying days later with excuses. Me sending her a link to an article I thought she'd like. Her never responding. Me wishing her happy birthday. Her thanking me in 2 words. But when she needed something, the response was immediate. I locked my phone and tossed it onto the cushion beside me. My mother's cruelty wasn't loud. It was strategic, calculated. She knew exactly what she was doing. Every dismissal, every comparison. To Chloe, every request disguised as a favor. It was control. It was her way of keeping me small, keeping me grateful for scraps, keeping me in a position where I'd always be trying to earn something she was never going to give. And I let her. For 32 years, I let her. I leaned my head back and stared at the ceiling. A crack ran along the corner, thin and barely visible. I'd been meaning to fix it for months. I thought about my father. He died 5 years ago. Heart attack. Sudden. He was the only one who ever defended me, quietly, in small ways. A hand on my shoulder when my mother made a cutting remark. A $20 bill slipped into my pocket when I was broke. He wasn't perfect. He never stood up to her directly. But he saw me. That was more than anyone else ever did. I reached for my phone again and opened my photo gallery. I scrolled back through years of images. Chloe's engagement party, a client meeting, a sunset I'd photographed last summer. And then I found it. A picture of my father. He was sitting at the kitchen table, looking tired, holding a thick stack of papers. Legal documents, maybe. His expression was serious, stressed. I remembered that day. I'd stopped by their house to drop off something, and he'd quickly shuffled the papers into a folder when I walked in. "Just some old paperwork," he'd said. But before he could say more, my mother had walked into the room. "Don't bother Emma with that," she'd said, her tone sharp. He'd looked at me for a long moment, like he wanted to say something. Then he'd nodded and put the folder away. I never asked what it was. I stared at the photo now, at the tension in his face, at the way his hands gripped those papers. What was he holding? And why didn't my mother want me to know? I stared at the photo of my father for a long time. Then I set my phone down and made a decision. I wasn't going to design those invitations. I opened my laptop and typed out a response to my mother. Simple, professional, calm. Hi, Mom. I appreciate you thinking of me, but I have a full client schedule right now and won't be able to take on any additional projects. I'm sure you can find a great designer. Best wishes to Chloe and Mark. I read it twice. It was polite, reasonable. The kind of boundary any adult should be able to set without consequence. I hit send. Then I closed my laptop and went to bed. I didn't sleep well. I kept waking up, checking my phone, waiting for a response. But nothing came. Not that night. The email arrived the next morning at 7:43. I was making coffee when my phone buzzed. I saw my mother's name and felt my stomach tighten. I opened the message. It wasn't short. Emma, I'm disappointed but not surprised by your refusal to help your own sister. You've always put yourself first, and this is just another example of your selfishness. Your father and I worked hard to give you opportunities, and you've wasted every single one. You chose a career with no stability, no future, and no respect. You live in a tiny apartment, you have no savings, and you can't even commit to helping family when it matters. Chloe has always been the responsible one. She made smart choices. She built a life. You've built nothing. We've talked about this as a family, and we've agreed that it's best if you stop attending family events. You bring negativity and judgment, and frankly, it's exhausting. Don't come to the wedding. Don't come to any gatherings. We're done pretending this works. Mom and Chloe. I read it once, then again, then a third time. My hands didn't shake. My breath didn't catch. I just stood there in my kitchen, the coffee maker hissing behind me, and felt something inside me go very still. They'd talked about this as a family, my mother and my sister. They discussed me like I was a problem to be solved, and they decided together that I was no longer worth the effort, signed by both of them. I set my phone down on the counter. I poured my coffee. I took a sip. It was too hot and burned my tongue, but I didn't care. I walked to my desk and sat down. I opened my laptop and read the email again on the larger screen. Every word felt like a scalpel, precise and deliberate. My mother didn't write in anger. She wrote with clarity, with purpose. This wasn't a reaction. This was a verdict, and it was in writing. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to be good enough, trying to prove I mattered, trying to earn a place at a table that was never set for me. I thought about my father and the papers he'd been holding, the conversation my mother had shut down. I thought about Chloe, who never defended me, who stood by silently while my mother tore me apart, and who now had the audacity to sign her name to this. And I realized something. I was free. Not in a happy way, not in a relieved way, but in a cold, clear way that felt like stepping out of a dark room into harsh daylight. There was nothing left to lose, no relationship to protect, no hope to cling to, no reason to stay quiet. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone or text back or beg for an explanation. I just sat there, staring at the screen, and felt the weight of 32 years lift off my shoulders and transform into something else, something sharp. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a folder. I printed the email. The printer hummed and spat out the page, black text on white paper, undeniable and permanent. I read it one more time in my hands. Then I slid it into a clear plastic sleeve and placed it carefully in the folder. Evidence. I opened a new document on my laptop. I stared at the blank page for a moment, my fingers hovering over the keys. Then I typed 2 words at the top. The plan. I didn't know exactly what it would look like yet, but I knew it would be thorough. I knew it would be calm. I knew it would be devastating. Because my mother had taught me one thing very well. Cruelty doesn't have to be loud to destroy someone. I leaned back in my chair and took another sip of coffee. My apartment was quiet. The morning light filtered through the window, soft and pale. And for the first time in my life, I felt something I'd never felt before when it came to my family. Power. Not the kind that comes from money or status or approval, The kind that comes from having nothing left to protect. The kind that comes from being pushed so far that you finally stop retreating and start moving forward. I looked at the blank document on my screen. Then I started typing. I spent 3 days working on the plan. 3 days of research, notes, and careful observation of every detail I could remember about my family's finances, relationships, and public image. Then I sent my reply. Mom, I understand. I respect your decision and won't attend any family events. I hope the wedding is beautiful. Take care. Short, calm, final. I hit send and waited. The response came within an hour. Emma, don't be dramatic. We can talk about this. I didn't reply. 2 hours later, another message. You're being childish. This is exactly why we can't have you around. I still didn't reply. The next day, my phone rang. My mother's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring 4 times before I answered. Hello? Emma, we need to talk. Her voice was tight, controlled. I think you misunderstood my email. I don't think I did, I said. My tone was flat, emotionless. You said not to come to family events. I'm respecting that. Well, things have changed. Chloe wants you at the bridal shower. It's next Saturday. You should come. I paused, not because I was considering it, but because I wanted her to feel the silence. I thought you said I bring negativity. Emma, don't twist my words. This is about family. Chloe specifically asked for you. That was a lie. Chloe had signed that email. She'd agreed I shouldn't be there, but my mother needed me now for some reason, and she was willing to rewrite history to get what she wanted. Why the change? I asked. Because we're trying to be the bigger people here. We're giving you another chance. Another chance. As if I'd done something wrong. As if I was the one who needed forgiveness. I'll think about it, I said. Emma, this is important. Don't make this difficult. I said I'll think about it. I hung up before she could respond. I sat there for a moment, staring at my phone. My mother was panicking. That much was clear. She needed me at that shower for appearances. She needed the family to look whole, unified, perfect. And that meant I had leverage. I texted back an hour later. I'll come to the shower, but I'm not staying long. Her reply was immediate. Thank you. See you Saturday. No apology, no acknowledgement of what she'd said in that email. Just relief that I'd agreed. I spent the next few days preparing. I bought a simple dress, nothing flashy. I rehearsed my calm, polite demeanor. I made sure I looked put together, stable, unbothered. Because the goal wasn't to cause a scene. The goal was to observe, to listen, to gather information. Saturday arrived. The bridal shower was at a country club, the kind of place my mother loved because it screamed status and money. I parked in the back and walked in through the main entrance, my shoulders straight, my face neutral. Chloe saw me first. She looked surprised, then uncomfortable. She walked over, her smile forced. Emma, you came. I did. That's great, really great. She glanced around, clearly unsure what to say next. Mom's inside. She'll be happy to see you. I nodded and walked past her. The room was decorated in soft pastels, flowers everywhere, a champagne tower in the corner. About 30 women were scattered around, laughing, chatting, holding delicate glasses and tiny plates of food. My mother stood near the center, talking to a group of her friends. She saw me and her expression shifted. Relief, then something else. Control. She walked over. Emma, I'm glad you're here. You asked me to come. Yes, well, mingle. Enjoy yourself. She turned and walked away before I could respond. I moved through the room slowly, nodding at people I half recognized, accepting a glass of champagne I didn't drink. I stayed on the edges, watching, listening. And then I heard it. I was standing near the hallway that led to the restrooms when I caught my mother's voice, low and tense. She was around the corner out of sight, talking to someone. We can't tell her yet. Not until after the wedding. A man's voice responded. Mark, Chloe's fiancé. Carol, this is a lot of money. If it falls through, it won't fall through. I have the deed. It's clean. But if Emma finds out, Emma doesn't know anything, and she won't. She's too busy playing the victim to pay attention. I froze. My hand tightened around the champagne glass. A deed. Money. Something they didn't want me to know about. What about the loan? Mark asked. If the bank? The bank won't find out. We'll have it sorted before anyone asks questions. Just keep Chloe calm and focused on the wedding. There was a pause. Then Mark spoke again, quieter. I don't like this. You don't have to like it, you just have to keep quiet. Footsteps. They were moving. I stepped back quickly, slipping into the main room, blending into a group of women near the gift table. My mother and Mark emerged from the hallway a moment later. She was smiling, composed. He looked tense. I watched them for a long moment. Then I set my champagne glass down on a nearby table and walked toward the exit. I didn't say goodbye. I just left. In my car, I sat in silence, my hands resting on the steering wheel. My mind was racing, but my body was still. A deed. A loan. A secret they were desperate to keep hidden. And they were using Chloe's wedding as a cover. Hearing that conversation, I felt a strange mix of shock and a cold sense of confirmation. It was like watching the perfect facade crack. And I realized I had only seen the surface of their dysfunction. What would you do in that moment? Would you walk away or would you start digging for the truth? Let me know in the comments. I started the car and drove home. And the entire way, I thought about what I just heard. My mother had a deed. She was hiding alone, and she was terrified I'd find out. I didn't know what it meant yet, but I was going to find out. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my desk, my laptop glowing in the dark, and I started digging. Public records are surprisingly easy to access if you know where to look. Property deeds, loan documents, business filings. Most of it is online, buried in county databases and state registries that most people never bother to search. But I wasn't most people. My father used to work in real estate law before he retired. He kept files at home, thick binders full of contracts and legal language I didn't understand as a kid. But I'd watched him work. I'd seen him trace ownership chains and flag inconsistencies. I'd learned more than I realized. I started with the property. My mother had mentioned a deed. That meant real estate. I pulled up the county assessor's website and started searching under her name. Nothing. I tried Chloe's name. Nothing. Then I tried Mark's name. And there it was, a property deed filed 3 months ago. A commercial lot on the outskirts of Seattle. The purchase price was listed as $450,000. The buyer was Mark Henderson, but the deed showed a co-signer, Carol Watson, my mother. I stared at the screen. $450,000. That was more than Mark should have. He worked in finance, made decent money, but not that kind of money. I clicked through to the loan documents. A private loan, not through a bank. The lender was listed as Redwood Ventures LLC. I searched for Redwood Ventures. It took me 20 minutes to find the business registration. The owner was a man named Gerald Finch. The name sounded familiar. I closed my eyes and tried to remember. Then it hit me. Gerald Finch. My father had mentioned him once, years ago, a business associate who'd tried to pull him into a real estate deal. My father had refused. He'd called it a sinking ship. I opened a new tab and searched for Redwood Ventures and Gerald Finch together. The results were sparse, but what I found was enough. Failed projects, delayed developments, investor complaints. The company was barely staying afloat. And my mother had convinced Mark to invest nearly $500,000 into it. I leaned back in my chair and rubbed my eyes. This wasn't just about excluding me from the family. This was about money, control. My mother had always been obsessed with status, with appearing successful. And now she was using Mark's inheritance to prop up a failing investment. Did Chloe know? Or was she as much a pawn in this as Mark seemed to be? I kept digging. I pulled up the full deed document and started reading through the fine print. Pages of legal language, clauses about zoning, and easements and liability. And then I saw it, buried in the middle of page 7, a clause I almost missed. In the event of sale or transfer of the property, the next of kin of the original deed holder, as defined by the estate of Richard Watson, retains the right of first refusal for a period of 10 years from the date of original purchase. I read it again, then a third time. Richard Watson, my father, the original deed holder. I scrolled back to the top of the document and checked the purchase history. The property had been owned by my father. He'd bought it 15 years ago as an investment. And when he died, it had passed to my mother as part of his estate. But this clause, this right of first refusal, it didn't pass to her. It passed to his next of kin, his children, me and Chloe. My mother had sold the property to Mark without notifying me, without offering me the chance to buy it or refuse the sale. She'd violated the terms of the deed, and that made the entire transaction legally questionable. I sat there in the dark, staring at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. My mother had made a mistake, a big one, and she didn't even know it. I saved the document. I printed a copy. I added it to the folder with the email, the one where she'd told me I was no longer part of the family. Then I opened my plan document and started typing. The pieces were coming together, slowly, carefully, but they were coming together. And for the first time since this all started, I felt something close to hope. Not the kind that makes you believe everything will be okay, the kind that makes you believe justice is possible. I looked at the clause again. The right of first refusal. A legal technicality my mother had overlooked because she'd been so focused on control that she'd forgotten to cover her tracks. My father had left me something after all. Not money, not property, a way out, and a way forward. The clause was a starting point, but I needed more. I needed to know what my father had actually intended, what he'd written in his will. I'd never seen the will. After he died, my mother handled everything. The funeral, the estate, the paperwork. She told me it was all straightforward, that everything had been left to her, and that was that. I'd believed her. I had no reason not to. But now I did. I thought about the photo again, my father holding those papers, looking stressed, the way my mother had shut down the conversation so quickly. He'd been trying to tell me something, and she'd stopped him. I remembered my father's habits. He was careful with important documents, organized. He kept copies of everything, and he didn't trust leaving things in obvious places. I drove to my mother's house the next afternoon. She wasn't home. I knew her. Schedule. Tuesday afternoon, she played tennis at the club. She'd be gone for at least 2 hours. I used my old key, the one I'd had since high school, the one she'd never asked me to return. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I stood in the entryway for a moment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the hallway clock. Then I walked to my father's old study. My mother had cleared most of it out after he died, donated his books, sold his desk. But the built-in shelves were still there, and so was the small wooden cabinet in the corner. I opened it. Old tax returns, insurance policies. Nothing useful. I checked the desk drawers. Empty. Then I remembered something. My father used to keep a safe deposit box at the bank. He'd mentioned it once, years ago, when I'd asked about important documents. Just in case, he'd said. You never know. I searched the study for 20 minutes before I found it. A small brass key taped to the underside of a picture frame on the bookshelf. A frame holding a photo of me and my father from when I was 10. I held the key in my hand and felt something crack inside me. He'd hidden it behind my picture. Not Chloe's, mine. I left the house and drove to the bank. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. At the counter, I explained that I needed access to my father's safe deposit box. I showed them the key and my ID. There was a brief conversation with a manager. They checked records. My name was listed as an authorized user. My mother had never removed it. They led me to the vault, a small, sterile room with rows of metal boxes. The clerk opened the box and left me alone. Inside was a single manila envelope. I opened it. The first document was a will, dated 2 months before my father died, more recent than the one my mother had filed. I read through it slowly. Legal language, asset distribution, and then I saw it. I leave the property located at 4721 Cascade Avenue Seattle, Washington, and all associated rights and proceeds to my daughter, Emma Watson. I do this with full awareness of my wife Carol's tendency toward reckless financial decisions and her preference for our younger daughter. Emma has always been responsible, thoughtful, and deserving of security. The words blurred. I blinked and kept reading. All remaining liquid assets are to be divided equally between Emma and Chloe, with the exception of the family home, which is left to Carol for her lifetime. My father had left me the property, the same property my mother had sold to Mark without telling me. I set the will down and reached back into the envelope. There was one more piece of paper, handwritten, my father's messy, familiar script. Emma, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and your mother has likely tried to control everything. I'm sorry I wasn't stronger. I'm sorry I didn't stand up to her more. But I need you to know that you deserve better. Protect what is yours. Don't let her take it from you. I love you, Dad. I sat there in that cold, quiet room and felt tears slide down my face for the first time since this all started. Not tears of sadness, tears of relief, of validation. My father had seen me. He'd known, and he'd tried to protect me. I wiped my eyes and carefully placed everything back in the envelope. Then I walked out of the bank with my father's will in my bag and a plan forming in my mind. I texted my mother the next day. Can we meet? I want to talk about the wedding seating chart. Her response was quick. Of course. Come by the house tomorrow at 2. I arrived exactly on time. She opened the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Emma, come in. I walked past her into the living room, the same room where I'd sat through countless dinners, countless dismissals, countless moments of being made to feel small, but today felt different. I sat on the couch. She sat across from me in her favorite chair, the one by the window. So, the seating chart, she said. I'm glad you're willing to help. I'm not here about the seating chart. Her smile faltered. What? I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. I set it on the coffee table between us. The email, the property deed, the will, all of it. I know what you did. She stared at the folder. Her face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. The property on Cascade Avenue. Dad left it to me. You sold it to Mark without telling me. You violated the terms of Dad's will. That's not true. Your father left everything to me. He left a second will, dated 2 months before he died. I have the original. Her hands gripped the armrests of her chair. You're lying. I'm not. And you know I'm not. She stood up, her voice rising. You have no right to go through his things. That's private. He left me access to his safe deposit box. My name was on the account. You never removed it. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her face shifted. The anger melted into something softer. Tears filled her eyes. Emma, please, you don't understand. I was trying to protect the family. Your father didn't know what he was doing at the end. He was confused. He wasn't confused. He was clear. He knew exactly what you were. How can you say that? I'm your mother. Her voice cracked. The tears spilled over. It was a performance I'd seen before. The victim act, the manipulation. But this time I didn't feel anything. You told me I wasn't part of the family anymore. You and Chloe signed an email saying I was too negative, too embarrassing, too much of a failure to be around. You didn't just exclude me. You erased me. I was upset. I didn't mean it. Yes, you did. She wiped her eyes. Emma, we can fix this. We can work this out. I'm not here to work anything out. I'm here to tell you that I know the truth. About the property, about the will, about the way you've treated me my entire life. Her tears stopped. Her face hardened. What do you want? Money? Is that what this is about? I want what's mine, what Dad left me, the property, the inheritance, all of it. She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You'll never be able to prove that will is real. I'll fight you. I'll make sure you lose everything. I stood up. I picked up my folder, and I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in years. She wasn't powerful. She wasn't untouchable. She was scared. I smiled. Not a warm smile, a cold, genuine smile. I already have the original, Mom, and I'm not planning on losing anything. Her face went white. I walked to the door. I didn't look back. And as I stepped outside into the afternoon light, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Free. I drove home from my mother's house with the windows down. The air was cool and sharp, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. Something had shifted, not just in the confrontation, but inside me. For 32 years, I'd carried the weight of her judgment. I'd let her define my worth, my success, my place in the world. I'd believed on some level that maybe she was right, that maybe I was the problem. But I wasn't. I never was. My father had seen that. He'd known, and he'd tried to protect me in the only way he could. Now it was my turn to protect what was mine. I spent that evening going through my father's note again, reading his words over and over. At the bottom, beneath his signature, there was a name and a phone number. David Brennan, attorney at law. I called the next morning. A woman answered, professional, polite. Brennan Law, how can I help you? I need to speak with David Brennan. It's regarding the estate of Richard Watson. There was a pause. One moment, please. I was transferred. A man's voice came on the line, older, steady. This is David Brennan. My name is Emma Watson. My father was Richard Watson. He left me your contact information. Another pause, longer this time. Emma. Yes, your father spoke about you. I'm very sorry for your loss. Thank you. I need your help. My mother filed a will after my father's death, but I've found a second will, more recent. It leaves property to me that she's already sold. Do you have the original document? I do. Then we need to meet. Can you come to my office tomorrow? Yes. Bring everything, the will, the deed, any correspondence. We'll go from there. I met with him the next day. His office was small, neat, filled with law books and framed diplomas. He reviewed everything carefully, his reading glasses perched on his nose. After 20 minutes, he looked up. This is legitimate. Your father updated his will 2 months before he passed. Your mother should have filed this version, not the earlier one. The fact that she didn't is a serious issue. What can we do? We file a petition with the probate court to recognize the valid will. We also file a claim against the property sale based on your right of first refusal. It won't be fast, but it will be effective. How long? A few months, maybe longer if your mother fights it. But you have the law on your side. I nodded. Let's do it. He started drafting the paperwork that afternoon. I signed documents, I provided statements, I answered questions, and through it all, I felt calm, focused, clear. This wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about justice, about reclaiming what had been stolen from me, about standing up for the person my father believed I could be. 2 days later, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I found Mark's email address. Chloe had sent me a group message months ago about the engagement party, and his contact was still saved. I typed carefully. Mark, I came across some information I think you should see before you move forward with any financial decisions. This is the public record for the property on Cascade Avenue. You might want to look at it before you sign anything else. I attached a link to the county property records, the deed, the loan, the cosigner, all of it. Then I hit send. I didn't write anything accusatory I didn't explain. I just gave him the facts and let him draw his own conclusions. Because that's all I needed to do. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. My inbox was empty. My apartment was quiet. And I realized something. I wasn't waiting for my family to see me anymore. I wasn't hoping for their approval or their love or their acknowledgement. I was done waiting. I was moving forward. On my own terms, with my own strength. And whatever happened next, I would face it standing tall. Not as the daughter who was never good enough, but as the woman my father always knew I was. Mark opened the email 2 days later. I know because that's when my phone rang. Chloe's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. Hello? What did you do? Her voice was shaking, not with sadness, with rage. I don't know what you're talking about. You sent Mark something, documents, about the property, about Mom. I sent him public records, information he should have had before he signed anything. You had no right. He had every right to know what he was investing in. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing, fast and shallow. He's furious, Emma. He's talking about calling off the wedding. Then maybe he should. How can you say that? This is my life. And it was his money. Money your mother convinced him to put into a failing investment without telling him the truth. You don't understand. Mom was trying to help us. Help you? Or help herself? Chloe's voice cracked. You've always been jealous of me. You've always wanted to ruin everything I have. I didn't ruin anything, Chloe. I just told the truth. She hung up. I set my phone down and stared at it for a long moment. My hands were steady. My breathing was calm. I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction. Just a strange, hollow quiet. The next day, I got a call from my lawyer. Emma, I need to inform you that your mother has been notified of the probate petition. She's been given 30 days to respond. What will she do? Most likely she'll contest it, but the evidence is strong. The second will is legitimate, and the right of first refusal clause is clear. She doesn't have much ground to stand on. Thank you. One more thing. I received a call from a Mark Henderson. He's requesting copies of the property documents. He's considering legal action against your mother for misrepresentation. I closed my eyes. Is he allowed to do that? If he can prove she knowingly misled him about the investment, yes, it's fraud. Good. I hung up and sat in silence. Mark was protecting himself, and in doing so, he was exposing my mother's lies to everyone. Not just me, not just Chloe. Everyone. The perfect family image was cracking, and I hadn't even had to push. That evening, I opened social media. I rarely used it anymore, but something told me to check. And there it was, a post from Chloe, long, emotional, public. I never thought I'd have to write this, but my sister Emma has decided to try to destroy my happiness. She's making false claims about our family, spreading lies about my mom, and trying to turn my fiancé against me. All because she's jealous that I've built a successful life and she hasn't. I've tried to be patient with her. I've tried to include her. But she's made it clear that she only cares about herself. If you're reading this, please know that the rumors you might hear are not true. My mom has done nothing wrong. Emma is bitter, and she's lashing out. I just want to marry the man I love in peace. I read it twice. Then I closed the app. My chest felt tight, but not from anger. From something else. Something sadder. Chloe believed what she was saying. Or maybe she just needed to believe it. Because the alternative, that our mother had used her, manipulated her, and lied to her for years, was too painful to accept. So she chose the easier story, the one where I was the villain. I thought about responding, about posting the documents, the will, the deed, the email where my mother had told me I wasn't part of the family anymore. But I didn't. Because this wasn't about winning a public argument. It wasn't about proving I was right. It was about protecting what was mine. And I'd already done that. When I saw Chloe's post, I felt nothing but a profound sadness for the person she had become. It made me wonder, when someone is so deeply committed to a lie, do you owe them the truth? Or do you simply owe yourself peace? It's a difficult question, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on the moral line between justice and cruelty. I turned off my phone and made tea. I sat by the window and watched the city lights flicker in the distance. And I realized something. I didn't need Chloe to understand. I didn't need my mother to apologize. I didn't need anyone to validate my experience or acknowledge my pain. I just needed to move forward. And that's exactly what I was going to do. I spent the next 3 days working on a single document, not a social media post, not an angry letter, a formal legal notice. I am a graphic designer. I know how to make things clear, professional, and impossible to ignore. And that's exactly what I did. The document was simple. 1 page, clean layout, professional fonts, no emotion, just facts. Notice of intent to exercise right of first refusal. Emma Watson, as named beneficiary in the estate of Richard Watson, hereby exercises her legal right of first refusal on the property located at 4721 Cascade Avenue, Seattle, Washington, as outlined in the original deed dated March 2010. All parties involved in the current sale are hereby notified that the transaction is contested and subject to probate review. Legal counsel has been retained. All further communication should be directed to David Brennan, attorney at law. I included the case number, the probate court filing, contact information for my lawyer. Then I printed 3 copies, one for the family lawyer, one for the bank handling the loan, and one for Gerald Finch, the man running the failing real estate venture. I didn't send it to my mother. I didn't send it to Chloe. They would find out soon enough. I mailed the documents certified, return receipt requested. I wanted proof that they'd been received. I wanted everything documented, clean, and legally airtight. Because this wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about justice. About reclaiming what my father had left me. About dismantling the foundation of lies my mother had built her perfect life on. 2 days later, the receipts came back. All 3 documents had been signed for. I sat at my desk and stared at the green slips of paper. My hands were steady. My breathing was calm. And then, my phone rang. My mother's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. Hello? Emma. Her voice was shaking, not with anger, with desperation. We need to talk. I don't think we do. Please, just listen. I made a mistake. I should have told you about the property. I should have been honest. You should have filed the correct will. I was protecting the family. Your father wasn't thinking clearly at the end. He didn't understand what he was doing. He understood perfectly. He knew you'd try to take everything, so he made sure I had a way to stop you. There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, fast and shallow. What do you want, Emma? Money? I can give you money. Just drop the legal action. I don't want your money. Then what? What will it take? I want what's mine, the property, the inheritance, everything Dad left me. You're going to ruin us. The deal with Gerald will fall through. Mark is already talking to lawyers. Chloe is devastated. The wedding might not even happen. That's not my problem. How can you say that? We're family. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. You told me I wasn't family. You put it in writing. You and Chloe both signed it. I was angry. I didn't mean it. Yes, you did. Her voice broke. Emma, please, I'm begging you. Don't do this. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I felt something. Not pity, not satisfaction. Just a deep, bone-tired sadness. You had 32 years to treat me like I mattered. You chose not to. Now you have to live with that choice. Emma, I hung up. I set my phone down on the desk and stared at it. My chest felt tight, but my hands didn't shake. This was the moment where I could have backed down, where I could have accepted her apology, forgiven the betrayal, and tried to rebuild something. But I didn't want to rebuild. I wanted to be free. I opened my laptop and checked my email. My lawyer had sent an update. The probate court had scheduled a hearing. My mother had 30 days to respond. But given the evidence, he was confident we'd win. I read the email twice. Then I closed my laptop and stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. Not happiness, not triumph, just a quiet, steady certainty that I was doing the right thing. My father had tried to protect me, and now I was protecting what he'd left behind. Not for revenge, not for money, for dignity, for truth, for the person I'd always been, even when my family refused to see it. I stood there for a long time, watching the light fade, and I knew that whatever happened next, I would face it standing tall. My lawyer called a week later. Emma, I've arranged a meeting. All parties will be present. Your mother, your sister, Mark, and Gerald Finch. We'll go through the evidence and settle this formally. Where? My office. Tomorrow at 2. Are you comfortable with that? I paused. Yes. Good, just stay calm. Let me do the talking. You don't need to say anything unless I ask you to. I understand. I arrived 15 minutes early. The office was on the 10th floor of a downtown building, all glass and steel, professional, neutral. David met me in the lobby. He was wearing a dark suit, his briefcase in hand. Ready? Yes. We walked into the conference room together. My mother was already there, sitting stiffly in a chair near the window. Chloe sat beside her arms crossed, her face pale. Mark sat across from them, his expression unreadable. And at the end of the table was Gerald Finch, a man in his 60s with thinning hair and nervous eyes. No one spoke when I walked in. I sat down next to my lawyer. I folded my hands on the table and waited. David opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. He placed them in the center of the table. Thank you all for coming. We're here to resolve the matter of Richard Watson's estate and the property located at 4721 Cascade Avenue. I'll be presenting the relevant evidence, and then we can discuss next steps. He slid the first document across the table. My father's second will. This is the valid will, dated 2 months before Mr. Watson's death. It clearly states that the property in question was left to his daughter, Emma Watson. The earlier will, which Mrs. Carol Watson filed with the probate court, has been superseded. My mother's face went white. That will isn't legitimate. Richard wasn't in his right mind. We have medical records showing he was fully competent at the time of signing. We also have testimony from the notary and 2 witnesses. The will is valid. David slid another document forward. The property deed. This is the original deed, which includes a right of first refusal clause. Emma, as next of kin, was legally entitled to be notified before any sale. She was not. That makes the current transaction invalid. Gerald Finch shifted in his seat. I wasn't aware of any clause. Carol assured me the sale was clean. She lied, David said simply. And that brings us to the financial misrepresentation. He placed a third document on the table. Bank records, loan statements, a detailed breakdown of the failing investment. Mr. Henderson, you were told this property was a sound investment. You were not informed that Redwood Ventures LLC has a history of failed projects and outstanding debts. You were also not told that Mrs. Watson stood to personally benefit from this deal through a consulting fee arrangement with Mr. Finch. Mark's jaw tightened. He looked at my mother. Is that true? She didn't answer. Carol! His voice was sharp now. Is that true? I was trying to help the family, she said quietly. By lying to me? By using my inheritance to bail out a failing business? It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? She looked down at her hands. Chloe reached for her, but my mother pulled away. Mark stood up. I'm done. I'm pulling out of the deal. And I'm calling off the wedding. Chloe's head snapped up. What? I can't marry into this. I can't trust any of you. Mark, please. I'm sorry, Chloe, but this is over. He walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft click. The room was silent. My mother sat frozen, staring at the table. Chloe was crying, her hands covering her face. Gerald Finch looked like he wanted to disappear. David slid a final document toward me. Emma, this transfers the property back into your name. Sign here. I picked up the pen. My hand was steady. I signed my name clearly, deliberately. Then I stood up. I didn't look at Chloe. I didn't look at Gerald. I looked at my mother. She was staring at me, her eyes red, her face hollow. And then she whispered, You're just like your father. You always ruin everything. I stopped. I turned to face her fully. No, Mom, I'm just finally cleaning up your mess. I walked to the door. I opened it, and I stepped out into the hallway. David followed me. Emma, you did well. The property is yours. The court will finalize everything within 30 days. Thank you. What will you do with it? I thought for a moment. I don't know yet, but it's mine, and that's enough. I walked to the elevator and pressed the button. The doors opened. I stepped inside. And as the doors closed, I saw my reflection in the polished metal, calm, composed, free. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt done. The elevator descended. I watched the numbers light up one by one. 10, 9, 8. And by the time I reached the ground floor, I realized something. I wasn't the invisible daughter anymore. I wasn't the failure. I wasn't the embarrassment. I was just Emma. And that was more than enough. I didn't go home right away. I walked, block after block, through downtown Seattle, past coffee shops and bookstores and people who had no idea what had just happened in that conference room. The air was cool. The sky was gray. And I felt lighter than I had in years. I didn't check my phone for hours. When I finally did, there were 17 missed calls, 12 text messages, 3 voicemails, none from my mother, none from Chloe. Most were from people I barely remembered. Distant cousins, old family friends, people who'd been at those dinners, those gatherings, those moments where I'd been dismissed and ignored. The messages were all similar. Emma, I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. I always knew your mother was difficult, but I had no idea. You did the right thing. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. One message stood out. It was from my father's brother, my Uncle Tom. I hadn't spoken to him in 5 years. He'd stopped coming to family events after my father died. Emma, your dad would be proud of you. Carol pushed everyone away who didn't fall in line. I'm glad you stood up for yourself. Call me if you need anything. I read it twice. Then I closed my phone and kept walking. Over the next few days, I heard things. Not from my family, but from other people. The kind of information that spreads quietly through small social circles. The wedding was officially canceled. Mark had moved out of the apartment he'd shared with Chloe. He'd hired his own lawyer and was pursuing legal action against my mother for fraud. The property deal collapsed. Gerald Finch was under investigation by the state for financial mismanagement. Several of his investors had filed complaints, and my mother's reputation, the one she'd carefully built over decades, was crumbling. People were talking. Not loudly, not publicly, but in whispered conversations at country clubs and charity events and dinner parties. The truth was spreading. Carol Watson had lied. She'd manipulated. She'd used her own daughter's fiancé to cover her bad investments. And when confronted, she'd tried to blame everyone but herself. I didn't participate in any of it. I didn't add fuel to the fire. I didn't need to. The truth was doing the work on its own. A week later, I received a letter. Not an email. An actual letter. On legal letterhead, delivered by certified mail. It was from my mother's lawyer. Not David, but someone else. Someone I didn't recognize. I opened it slowly. Dear Ms. Watson, I am writing on behalf of my client, Carol Watson, to inform you that she has made the decision to sell the family home located at 1847 Maple Drive, Seattle, Washington. The proceeds will be used to settle outstanding debts and legal fees. Mrs. Watson will be relocating out of state and requests no further contact. Sincerely, Robert Fielding, attorney at law. I read it 3 times. She was leaving, selling the house where I'd grown up, the house where my father had lived and died, the house where I'd sat through countless dinners feeling invisible. And she was running. I set the letter down on my kitchen table and stared at it. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt sad. Not for her, but for the years I'd lost trying to earn her love, for the person I might have been if I'd walked away sooner. But I also felt something else. Relief. Because this was it. The final severing. The last thread cut. She was gone. And I was free. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the folder with everything else. The email, the will, the deed, the evidence of a lifetime of betrayal. Then I closed the folder and put it away. I didn't need to look at it anymore. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. The sun was setting, painting the buildings in shades of gold and orange. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I could breathe without the weight of her judgment pressing down on me. I was 32 years old. I had my father's property. I had my independence. I had my dignity. And I had myself. That was enough. 3 months later, I bought a house. Not an apartment. A house. Small, but mine. It had 2 bedrooms, a backyard with overgrown roses, and windows that let in morning light. I walked through it the first time and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Safety, belonging, home. The property my father left me had been sold. Not to Gerald Finch, not to my mother, to a developer who paid fair market value. The money was enough to buy this house outright, with plenty left over. I didn't need a mortgage. I didn't need anyone's approval. I just signed the papers and got the keys. Moving in was quiet. I didn't have much furniture, a bed, a desk, a couch I'd bought secondhand. But every piece was mine, chosen by me, paid for by me. I set up my home office in the second bedroom. Large windows, good light, space for my computer and my design tools. I hung a few prints on the walls, simple, clean, peaceful. And I worked. Not because I had to prove anything, but because I loved it. My client list grew. Word of mouth spread. People liked my work. They respected my professionalism. And slowly, steadily, I built something real. I thought a lot about revenge during those months, about what it meant, about whether I'd gotten it. The truth is, I didn't set out to destroy my mother. I set out to protect what was mine, to reclaim what my father had tried to give me, to stop being invisible. And in doing that, the truth came out. The lies unraveled, the perfect facade cracked. But that wasn't revenge. That was just consequence. Real revenge would have required me to stay angry, to stay bitter, to keep looking back and replaying every moment of hurt and humiliation. And I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted peace. I wanted to wake up in my own house, drink my own coffee, and work on projects I cared about. I wanted to live a life that wasn't defined by someone else's judgment. And that's exactly what I did. I didn't hear from my mother again. No calls, no letters, no attempts at reconciliation. She'd moved to Arizona, according to my Uncle Tom, started over, told people a different version of the story, I'm sure. I didn't care. Chloe sent one message months later, short, cold. I hope you're happy now. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Mark reached out once, too. An email, polite, apologetic. Emma, I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening sooner. You deserved better. I hope you're doing well. I wrote back, just as polite, just as brief. Thank you. I hope you're doing well too. And that was it. The door closed. The chapter ended. One afternoon, I was working at my desk when I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked to the front door and opened it. No one was there, but on the porch, there was a small package, unmarked, no return address. I picked it up and brought it inside. I set it on the kitchen table and stared at it for a moment. Then I opened it. Inside was a single photograph, old, worn at the edges. It was a picture of me and my father. I was maybe 8 years old, sitting on his shoulders, laughing. He was smiling, his hands holding my ankles to keep me steady. I didn't remember this photo. I didn't know it existed. I turned it over. On the back, in faint pencil, barely legible, were 4 words. I'm proud of you. M. M. Mark. I set the photo down gently and stared at it. He'd found this somehow. Maybe in my mother's things. Maybe in the house before it was sold. And he'd sent it to me. Not as an apology. Not as an explanation. Just as a gift. A reminder that my father had loved me. That he'd been proud of me. That I'd mattered. I picked up the photo again and carried it to my office. I found a small frame in a drawer and placed the picture inside. Then I set it on my desk, next to my computer. And I looked at it for a long time. My father's smile. My younger self. Carefree and happy. A moment before everything got complicated. Before the neglect. Before the betrayal. Before I learned what it meant to be invisible. but also a reminder that I'd survived all of it, that I'd fought back, that I'd reclaimed my life. I sat down at my desk and took a deep breath. The house was quiet. The light was soft. The world outside continued on, indifferent and endless. And I was okay. More than okay. I was free. 6 months after I bought my house, I landed the biggest client of my career, a tech startup in downtown Seattle. They wanted a complete brand redesign, logo, website, marketing materials, everything. The project was challenging, exciting, and it paid more than I'd made in the previous 6 months combined. I worked hard, I stayed focused, and when I presented the final designs, the CEO looked at me and said, "This is exactly what we needed. You're incredibly talented." I smiled, not because of the compliment, though it was nice, but because I believed it too. I was talented, I was capable, and I'd built this life entirely on my own. My calendar filled up, word spread, clients recommended me to other clients. I hired a part-time assistant to help with administrative work. I raised my rates, and for the first time in my life, I felt successful. Not because someone told me I was, but because I knew it in my bones. I started making friends too, real ones, people who saw me for who I was, not who my family thought I should be. There was Sarah, a photographer I met at a networking event. We grabbed coffee once and ended up talking for 3 hours. She was kind, funny, and honest. We became close quickly. There was James, a web developer who worked on a project with me. He was quiet, thoughtful, and genuine. We met for lunch occasionally, just to talk about work and life. And there was my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, an older woman who brought me homemade dumplings when I first moved in. She checked on me, asked how I was doing, and never once judged me. These people didn't know my history. They didn't know about my mother or Chloe or the years of being overlooked. They just knew me. And they liked me. I thought a lot about that email. The one my mother and Chloe had sent. The one that said I was no longer part of the family. At the time, it felt like the worst thing that had ever happened to me. A final, brutal rejection. But looking back, it was the greatest gift I'd ever received. Because it forced me to stop waiting, to stop hoping, to stop trying to earn something that was never going to be given. It forced me to build my own life, my own family, my own sense of worth. And in doing that, I found something I'd never had before: peace. Real, deep, lasting peace. One Saturday afternoon, Sarah and I met at a coffee shop near my house. We ordered lattes and sat by the window, watching people walk by. We talked about work, about her latest photography project, about my upcoming client presentation. And then she asked, casually, "So, do you see your family much? Are they here in Seattle?" I paused. I took a sip of my coffee, and I thought about how to answer. A year ago, I would have felt ashamed, embarrassed, like I needed to explain or justify or make excuses. But now I felt nothing but calm. I set my cup down and looked at her. "I don't have one," I said. "I'm building one." She tilted her head, curious but not prying. "That sounds like a story." "It is," I said. "But it's also a new beginning." She smiled. "I like that." We sat there for a while longer, talking and laughing, and I realized something. This was my family now, not by blood, not by obligation, but by choice. People who saw me, who respected me, who cared, and that was more than enough. I walked home later that afternoon, the sun warm on my face, and I thought about my father, about the will he'd left, about the note he'd written. "Protect what is yours." I had. And in doing so, I'd found something even more valuable than property or money. I'd found myself. I unlocked my front door and stepped inside. The house was quiet, peaceful, mine. I walked to my office and looked at the photo on my desk. Me and my father, smiling, happy. And I whispered, "I did it, Dad. I protected what was mine." Then I sat down, opened my laptop, and got back to work. Because this was my life now. and it was exactly what I'd always deserved. I think a lot about forgiveness. People talk about it like it's the final step, like you can't truly move on until you forgive the people who hurt you. But I don't believe that anymore. Forgiveness isn't something you owe anyone. It's not a requirement for healing, and it's definitely not something you give just because time has passed. I don't forgive my mother. I don't forgive Chloe. Not because I'm bitter or holding a grudge, but because forgiveness implies that what they did was forgivable, that it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. It wasn't. It was deliberate, calculated, a lifetime of small cruelties that added up to one clear message: you don't matter. And I don't need to forgive that to be free from it. I just need to live a life that proves their judgment was wrong. And that's exactly what I've done. I wake up every morning in a house I own. I work on projects I love. I spend time with people who see me, respect me, and care about me. I don't think about my mother anymore. Not with anger, not with sadness. I just don't think about her. She's a part of my past, a chapter that's closed, and I'm okay with that. Sometimes I wonder if she ever thinks about me, if she ever regrets what she did, if she ever realizes that the daughter she dismissed was the one who turned out just fine. But honestly, it doesn't matter, because my peace doesn't depend on her acknowledgement. It never did. It depends on me, on my choices, on my ability to walk away from toxicity and build something better. And I did that. I built a life, a real one. Not perfect, not glamorous, but mine. There's a quote I read once that stuck with me. You can't heal in the same environment that made you sick. And that's the truth. I couldn't heal in that family. I couldn't grow. I couldn't become the person I was meant to be. So I left. Not physically at first, but emotionally. And eventually, legally. And in doing so, I found something I'd been searching for my entire life: myself. Not the version of me my mother wanted. Not the version Chloe compared herself to. Not the version I thought I needed to be to earn their love. Just me, Emma, 32 years old, graphic designer, homeowner, friend, survivor. And that's enough. More than enough. I think about my father sometimes, about the will he left, about the note he wrote: protect what is yours. I did. But I also realized something. What was mine wasn't just property or money. It was my dignity, my self-worth, my right to be treated with respect. And I protected all of it. I look at the photo on my desk every day, me and my father, smiling, happy, before everything got complicated. And I think about how proud he'd be. Not because I won some legal battle, not because I exposed my mother's lies, but because I survived, because I chose myself, because I didn't let their cruelty define me. That's the real victory, not revenge, not vindication, just peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you did the right thing, even when it was hard, even when it hurt, even when no one was watching. I sit here now, in my home office, the afternoon light streaming through the windows, and I feel something I haven't felt in a long time: gratitude, not for my family, not for the pain they caused, but for the strength I found in spite of it, for the life I built, for the people I chose, for the woman I became. The truth is, they didn't cut me out of the family. They simply gave me permission to finally choose my own. And I did. I chose kindness. I chose honesty. I chose people who saw my worth without me having to prove it. I chose myself. And that's the end of the story. It took a long time to get here, but I finally found my peace. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to fight for your own worth, then thank you for being here and listening. It means the world to me. If you want to see more stories about finding strength in the quiet moments, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Until next time, be well and choose your own family. I close my laptop and stand up. I walk to the window and look out at the street. The sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. A new day is ending, and tomorrow another one will begin. And I'll be here, in my house, living my life, free. Not because I won, not because they lost, but because I finally learned the most important lesson of all. You don't need anyone's permission to matter. You just need your own. And I gave myself that permission a long time ago. I turn away from the window and walk back to my desk. I pick up the photo of me and my father. I trace the edge of the frame with my finger, and I whisper one last time, "Thank you, Dad, for everything." Then I set it down gently and walk out of the room, because this story is over, and my life is just beginning.